How's everyone doing? Isn't this fun? You guys get to hear me, but I don't get to hear anything. So, how's everyone doing this afternoon? I think there's people way in the back. I guess it doesn't matter. You can all see the slides. Welcome. Thanks for coming to the inaugural Reinforce. Have you guys already been able to make it out to a bunch of sessions? Several sessions? How many for this is their first one? Wow. I feel honored. This is exciting. How far did you guys travel? Raise your hand if you traveled more than half the country to get here. Oh, wow. I'm impressed. I came all the way from Hawaii on Sunday. I don't live there. I was on vacation. But I took a red eye. I thought it was a good idea at the time. Turned out not so great. Because we have the tendency to stay out late drinking. I don't know if any of you guys have ever done that before, but welcome. Glad you guys are here. I'd like to introduce myself briefly, and then we'll get started. So Benjamin Andrew, yes, I have two first names. I actually have three, but I won't bore you with the details. What I'd like to do is just tell you a little bit about who's sponsoring this session, and then we're going to dive into the topic, because I know you guys are here to talk about securing your code and the integrity of your code. If you guys are doing DevOps and you're doing a pipeline and you want to talk about that. Before I get into that, just a brief intro and the team that I work on, so you know a little bit of context of why we're doing this and why I'm going to be talking about third-party software rather than native software. So if you're here for native AWS software, you're in the wrong session. You need to go to a couple of other DevSecOps sessions. If you're here to talk about third-party software available in Marketplace to do the same thing, that's what I'm going to talk to you about. So just want to let you know ahead of time before you get disappointed if you might be here for the other. So Benjamin Andrew, Global Head of Cloud Security and Infrastructure in Marketplace. AWS Marketplace is hosting this session. And as a category manager, or manager of categories of software, just like when you go to Amazon.com and you look at, for the guys in the room, tools, maybe DeWalt or whatever, there's a category manager for tools. Maybe you're buying clothing, and a category manager in Amazon.com there's gonna be a category manager over all different kinds of clothing, phones, everything else. We do the same thing in AWS Marketplace, where we sell third-party software. And really what my team does is we optimize that software for use in the cloud. So all the work that my team and myself do, we spend time with all the vendors that you already work with and already know well. Some of them are born in the cloud. Many of them were not, and we're helping them along their own cloud transformation journey to make them cloudy, not only just in the way they sell it with pricing and metering and utility pricing models, but also making sure that the problems that they solved in the on-prem world still exist in the cloud, or if they don't exist, then morphing their technology and focusing on new, more interesting problems, challenges in the hybrid cloud. So I see some familiar faces. Raise your hand if I've already met you before. I just want to see how many friends I have in the audience. I see you, Pesh, up here in the front from Aqua. Anybody else? All right, well, I have some people I need to meet, obviously. Thanks for coming. And what I'm really looking forward to doing is just sharing a journey with you. And we like to tell stories. We like to talk about solutions in the way of stories that are really relevant to you. So how many of you are developing software in your company today? Maybe you don't even have to be a software vendor, but you're developing software in your company. Okay, excellent. How many of you that are developing software are using a DevOps model? Okay. How many would like to, but you're not there yet? Okay, wow. I don't think I've had this many people, this percentage of people ever raise their hand that's already doing DevOps. So that's really cool. How many of you guys have security physically nearby the development teams? Physically nearby. Wow. Okay, I'm going to sit down, and I want one of you guys to come and teach this session, because you probably know more about it than I do. That's great. So my background before we dive in, why am I up on stage in Boston when I live in Portland, Oregon? Why did they let me do this when I didn't even graduate from university? I actually have about 19 years of experience in security, and prior to that, about 5 years of experience as a network engineer. So I have a technical background, so I've had to learn this whole business thing. But my experience that's very relevant to this topic is that for about 12 years I did professional services in networking and security I worked for a small company called McAfee. Don't hold that against me. For about 15 years. 8 of those years I was in ProServe for the Fortune 100, traveling all over the world. And even though I was not a pre-sales engineer, I was always a post-sales consultant. I would come in to help make sure that the product that the customers had purchased would actually work properly, and they would keep the account. So I spent a lot of time with a lot of the big companies that we work with. I looked at the Fortune 100 list one time, and I had personally visited over 34 of them. So I was pretty amazed. I didn't even know many of them were in the Fortune 100 list when I was there. But so many years doing that, learning a lot of things one-on-one with customers and hearing their challenges and helping them. My strength was really software management, security management, and then eventually I moved into developing security software. I was a product manager for the virtualization platform at McAfee for about 7 years. So I built the entire virtualization product portfolio from virtualization security with VMware, with Citrix, with Microsoft. And then eventually we rolled that capability into the main product line. And then when I moved into a role working with alliances as a technical alliances director, I began to work with cloud marketplaces, and that's where I learned about AWS Marketplace. And I was researching other marketplaces to try to figure out where should we take our products next to get access to the cloud customers and to help customers as they make their journey to the cloud. And I found out that AWS was so much further along than anyone else. I decided I need to spend some time with these guys. And after I started doing that, they called me up and asked me to run security for the marketplace. So that was my journey to here. And then for the last 4 years at AWS, I've actually had the pleasure to work with just about every security vendor in the world that's called to work with AWS that wants to make their software available in the AWS Marketplace. When I started, there was about 150 individual security product listings in Marketplace, and now we have over 800. And I've worked with most of those myself, and now I have a team because it's growing so fast that it's impossible for one person to keep up. But anyway, that's what I do. I work with CEOs and heads of product and heads of sales and heads of marketing and solution architecture and alliances, and that's what we do. We spend time with vendors, and we want to make them successful so that you as customers, when you make your transition into the cloud and you're building software in the cloud, you guys have access to the best technology that you can get. And so we're constantly giving vendors long lists of things that they need to do to improve their software and to make it more cloud native and cloud friendly, leveraging AWS native services, protecting more than just EC2, right? Hey, there's a lot of services in AWS. So when a vendor comes to us and says, hey, we have a product, we protect EC2, I'm like, that's great, get in line, right? If you do a search on Marketplace for firewall, you'll find 185 firewalls. If you search for IDS, you'll find 179 IDS solutions. So we're really looking at how do we make sure that every facet of security has a good solution available for you. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is security of the code and the pipeline. And I'm going to tell a story that's probably relevant to most of you. And if you're wanting to get into software development, the goal for us is to make sure that we keep security along the process of the development so that you don't have to add it later. Really design it in is the goal. So that's where we're going. And I hope this is relevant to you. And thanks for coming. So let's jump in. Marketplace, again, I mentioned it's a place where we make available curated digital catalog of software. We're hosting this session. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Marketplace. I will sprinkle some thoughts throughout the topic just so that you're aware of ways that you can buy this. But really, we're going to tell a story. We want software to be available to you the same way that AWS native services are available to you. Quick, easy to deploy, pay as you go, verified. So we spend a lot of time to make sure that everything in the catalog is clean, free from malware, not going to introduce exploits in your environment, and is available for you in your AWS bill in a section called software, just along with every other native service that you're paying for. So just to give you a little bit of perspective on volume before we talk about DevSecOps, Marketplace has over 4,800 different software listings from over 1,400 individual independent software vendors. Over 230,000 active people like you are buying in the Marketplace every month. We have more than 1 million current subscriptions, and we just announced today for the first time publicly over 100,000 active security subscriptions in Marketplace, which is over 10% of the number of subscriptions that we have overall. Available in 18 AWS regions, and it's a day zero feature, so every new region that gets rolled out, Marketplace is available day zero. It's a requirement now. And this is how many of the government, GovCloud and EC2 Marketplace for C2S Cloud for the IC community, they require us to be able to have a marketplace like this to be able to win big contracts that you may have heard about. So really important part of the business. The most popular categories are up here. Security is number 1. Networking is number 2. From a revenue and adoption perspective, operating systems and open source are also really high on that list. And those are the categories that I'm responsible for. And then there's a bunch of other categories that are available in what really helps customers is to be able to buy lots of different types of software from all these different vendors. This is just a subset of them, and then pay for it in their AWS bill. So now let's talk about security, since that's why you guys came, and I don't want to bore you. My goal was to get through that pitch within 5 minutes, and I think I spent a little too long. So let's talk about security of your code, and we're going to focus not on the infrastructure itself, but on the code pipeline itself, to be specific. We use this example here of telling the story of security because it's a common framework. The NIST framework is very common for people to understand, and really what we're going to be doing with this, and the reason I'm showing this slide, is that all the software in security that comes into the marketplace, we're going to be categorizing this to make this easier for you. When you find software, you don't have to search for a specific brand. You'll be able to actually click on a category and see all the different applications available. Many of you guys are software development. You don't need to know the benefits of DevOps, but what we're going to talk about next is DevSecOps, or adding security to your DevOps environment and making that a part of the operation on a daily basis. So why is this important? And this is where I like to tell some fun and maybe sometimes potentially scary stories. If you were in my shoes, you would have not enjoyed the experiences that I walk through, things that could have been avoided had you had automation and security built into process. So part of my role in doing security operations, which is really what I did when I was doing consulting, was I was helping big companies, and they were typically migrations. How many of you guys are going through a migration right now in your environment? How many of you guys are moving applications, trying to find out where they are? How many of you guys are just, anyone in here, closing down data centers? So all those things that you guys are doing, those are the things that I did when I was helping customers when I was in security consulting. So a lot of what I did, though, I did by myself. So I was a one-man show, showing up massive environments. There would be these big systems integrators with 15 and 20 people in the cube next to me, and I'd be doing the whole thing by myself. The problem with that is that there was no check and balance, and there was no people making sure that what I did was the right thing. They didn't get change orders in many cases. They just trusted me maybe a little too much, if you know what I mean. And so I have a couple kind of scary experiences, which really I don't want you guys to experience. So I like to tell these stories because they scare people, but it's intended to motivate you with the reason why you should put security in your code in the first place. And so one example was I was out at a large Midwest bank. They had asked me there for about 6 weeks to do a big migration from an old security platform to a new one. And I was migrating security policies from an old system to a new system, and I got tired of having to create a new policy for every single remote location that this bank had. And so after spending several days on it, I got kind of lazy, and I thought, man, I could save a lot of time if I just simplify this policy. I don't even understand why we're doing this anyway. So I clicked one button, which brought everyone's policy back to the master. And about 10 minutes later, I get a tap on the shoulder from the head of security, and he goes, hey, we're having an outage. And I don't really know how to describe it, but it's kind of like a DDoS. And all of operations worldwide is come to a crawl, and no branches around the world. This is middle of a day on a Tuesday. No branches in the entire system can reach the head office. You don't have any idea why this might be happening? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, if I think of anything, I'll let you know. And I walk back to my desk, and as I walk back, I realized, oh, what did I do? So right away, I went back to him, and I think I know what the problem is. I did this and this, and he goes, Ben, we didn't have any of that documented. Like, every time I put a policy for a remote office, it was someone called me and said, here's the FTP location, here's the HTTP address, here's the UNC share, here's the password. I wrote it directly into the system. I don't have any of this documented. This is going to take us days. I don't even know it's possible to recover from this. Please tell me that you have a way to fix this. And I made him panic for a couple minutes, but I told him that every time I make changes to an environment, I always do a backup of the database. And so I was literally toying with, do I restore this database and lose 2 hours worth of work? Yes, that's the right answer, Ben. So I called the number of the DBA, and I said, hey, I need you to restore this database. And he's like, I can't talk to you right now. We're in the middle of an outage. I'm like, yeah, I understand. This will help. And he's like, I'm sorry, what was your name again? I'm like, my name is not important. Matter of fact, the less you know, the better. I'm just going to send you a link to this database, and if you could just restore it, I'm pretty sure the problem's going to go away. He's like, wait, who are you? And I'm like, again, not important. And in 12 minutes after we restored the database, everything was back up and running. And he was like, man, that was a close call. And I'm like, yeah. He paid my bill. This is when I was subcontracting. I was amazed that he paid my bill. I was amazed that he didn't just walk me off the campus. But that type of thing could have been easily avoided if you would have put policies in place, if you had people, processes in place. How many know it's not about just adding the right code and the right application, it's having the processes in place. I think DevSecOps is more of a framework, it's more of a mindset than it is anything else. So to me, if that doesn't scare you, I've got another story of another bank that I won't bore you with the details, but I brought them down in North America on a Monday. And that was when I was a product development, I was a product manager. And they did a deployment of my product without doing any testing. And their pilot went out to 85,000 nodes on a Friday. Who does that on a Friday? Who does that large of a pilot? Anyway, it was melting their proxy servers because of retries, because they blocked access to a back-end connection that they didn't know needed to be there. So all I'm trying to say is, you guys probably have scary stories too that you could share with your friends, but it's so important that as a developer, your job is to build faster. The operations team, their job is to keep everything stable and not allow any changes in, but security is to make sure that anything the development team is doing doesn't end up causing an outage for you, or worse, end up causing a negative press to your organization. So it's critical that we do this, and there are plenty of other stories I want to tell, but I really want to dive into how do we do this in the pipeline itself. And so I'm going to show you a little bit of a framework here, and many are familiar with these different phases of a CI/CD pipeline. You might call them something slightly different, but for the sake of today, we're going to talk about the pre-commit, commit, acceptance, and deployment phases. And inside of each of these phases, I'm going to highlight kind of what's going on, and then what are the things that the outcomes that you should be looking for if you're building security into the code. So first, we'll start with on the pre-commit side. We're going to start with the threat modeling. And really, when you hear the term shift left, it's really get the security into as far left as possible, meaning before the code is even finished being developed or being written, it's being reviewed while it's being written. And there's applications on the market that do this that have been there for years, and they're referred to as static analysis, security, static analysis, software testing. There's also dynamic analysis. Static analysis you can run after the code has been written. Dynamic analysis, slightly different, but it actually monitors the code while you're writing it. That's the primary difference. Some people think that one is better than the other. They both do about the same thing. It just kind of depends on when you're doing it. But really the goal here is to, before And until a change to the configuration is checked in and published, you want to make sure that there are no vulnerabilities that you're introducing in the actual code itself. So that's really as far left as you can go. And there's some solutions on the marketplace that actually do this. There's solutions that are in process that are coming. And the one that I'll be able to talk about one that's actually just went live today from Contrast Security. And they actually just did an announcement. They announced it, released it this morning. So you'll probably, if you look up Contrast Security in Marketplace, it'll show up. I have it on my web browser over here, but they told me, no, it's got to be approved. So you guys can check it out. Go to aws.amazon.com/marketplace, search for Contrast Security, and they actually just put their product in there just this morning. That was actually done by a vendor who helps vendors get into Marketplace by the name of Tackle.io. Tackle.io does work for us, and vendors pay them. So we make it as easy as possible, but for vendors that don't even have time to write to our APIs, they'll just hire this other company and they do it for them, so it's pretty cool. Anyway, static analysis testing in the integrated development environment is really the goal is to reduce overall costs of your development by finding any of these issues before, in a traditional method, before you would ever send it to QA. So it's all done right in the development process. It's literally changed the title of software development. SDET is now a common software development engineer role. Software development and test changed just because of this type of a concept of doing the QA while you're writing the code. But leveraging a tool that's going to look for any vulnerabilities at the first point they can enter the application pipeline. And that's probably the best way to reduce significant impact in your code, is to do that as early as possible. Another vendor that does this well is Veracode Greenlight. Veracode is working with us, and we're going to be putting them in the marketplace soon. And this is an early preview. But they have a SaaS-based static engine that finds security defects in the code to provide contextual remediation advice to help you fix in seconds right in your IDE. So super cool. This will be available coming soon. The next phase is the commit stage. And really, when you check in code, the commit phase is automatically triggered. You build and perform basic automated testing of the system, and these steps are going to give fast feedback return back to the developers. And really what they're looking for is, did this break the build? And the stage needs to be complete before it moves into the acceptance phase. So in this phase, you're looking at any third-party software. So a lot of developers are going to use third-party code. They're going to use open source code. And how many of you have the time to review open source code yourself and look for vulnerabilities? I know I don't. So we look to vendors that actually have a massive catalog of software composition analysis, software component analysis tools. They look for every open source component, and they do continuous checks on that code to verify, to make sure there's no vulnerabilities in it. So the goal there is to reduce the threat of vulnerabilities. If you're depending on any open source libraries, you can leverage a technology. The vendor that we're highlighting here is WhiteSource. WhiteSource has the largest, to my knowledge, the largest database of open source software, and from, I believe, over 8 programming languages. So pretty extensive library. There's other solutions on the market that might be less expensive, but this has the broadest range. And the way that this is available in Marketplace is sold by the number of developers, contributing developers in your environment. So if you're a small shop, you don't have to pay a ridiculously high price. They sell this directly in Marketplace. 70 million open source files. Oh, sorry, 200 languages, not 8. 200 binary and source languages with over 70 million open source files. Pretty crazy. So check that out. That's going to help you so you don't have to do that work yourself. Another area that you should be looking at is to scan your images, any container images, to look for vulnerabilities and to compare the dependencies to a known list of vulnerabilities and exposures, or CVEs. So container vulnerability analysis scanners are available, and they can identify just one vulnerability in one container if left unchecked, it could spread to others unless you have like a database firewall or a least privilege solution in place, which I can highlight in just a minute. But important to identify any vulnerabilities in any containers if you're building microservices applications. So I like to highlight Aqua. Upesh is sitting in the third row here. Wave your hand, Upesh. So he's actually based in this area. So if you guys want to chat with him later. He didn't pay me to do this. He didn't even know I was doing this. Maybe you did. But anyway, the thing I like about Aqua, first of all, is that they're looking at security of containers in a different way than a lot of vendors do. A lot of vendors focus just on, is there malware in a container? But the thing that I like about Aqua is that they actually teach people. If you look at their blogs, they have some pretty awesome blogs where they really teach the development community on security of operations in the DevOps toolchain. And I learn a lot reading their blogs. They've got some pretty smart people on their team. But the cool thing that I like about them is that they're looking at who has access to publish into production. And they're looking at users and access control and least privilege. So super smart capabilities there. And Aqua is available in the marketplace in a pay-as-you-go, and they charge based upon the number of images or units, so the number of containers. It's a pretty low price. Again, the nice thing is, the thing that I think this really exemplifies is kind of like the way that AWS is building tools for builders to allow you, to help you to be able to develop quickly and not to have to spend a lot of money to innovate. When you're buying software that's at a cost per unit, you're not having to pay an upfront annual fee or annual subscription to be able to innovate quickly. So I like solutions that are priced like this because it really follows the AWS model really well, and it enables you to be able to develop quickly. So there's other vendors in this space, but I like to highlight the cool ones. That's what I'm talking about them. Acceptance stage, let's move on for the sake of time. The acceptance stage is triggered by a successful commit, and it's the latest good commit build is picked up and deployed to an acceptance test environment. Really here what we're looking for security controls that are going to have automated configuration management and provisioning of the runtime environment. You're going to use things like Puppet, Salt, or Docker to ensure that the test environment is clean before you move on to deployment. So in this phase, you want to use tools that do dynamic analysis security testing, and really it's looking at a view into the internal source code of the application, really just to indicate whether or not there's any vulnerabilities, any I/O validation issues, cross-site scripting, SQL injections that might be inside that before it gets published. So I like to talk about Qualys a little bit. There's a few vendors that are doing this in Marketplace and making this available. The Qualys web app scanner is really cool. It actually is available in Marketplace, and the pricing is based upon the number of applications. So again, every vendor charges slightly different. Each component a little bit different, but really useful tool to protect your web application before production. So there's other vendors in the space again, but that's the one we're talking about today. And then the final phase is the deploy phase. So again, all this testing, you need to manage the process all the way along and make sure you know who has access, who can deploy this into production. Again, Aqua solution will help you with that. But now that the changes are ready to be deployed in production, you want to do your final approvals and scheduling for continuous delivery. And in that, you're going to look for automated deployment and release orchestration, where you're going to do a runtime check. And runtime or production security, there's vendors that focus just on security at runtime. And one of the vendors that we'll talk about is a runtime application self-protection solution that is available from a company called Previty. There's a couple of other vendors that are actually doing that now. Trend Micro recently bought a vendor, and they have now deep security for applications as well. There's another solution that I like as well, which is from Apparetto. Apparetto does a microservices firewall, and they actually do least privilege of all the components within the application, including serverless, including containers, including AMIs, so that you can reduce the risk to the application by eliminating the wrong permissions for each component. So the goal of a RASP, or application security monitoring, is to prevent all of these types of cross-site scripting, forgery. Any of this is done by not by securing the perimeter, or by securing the network, by actually securing the components of the application, putting firewalls, if you will, between each component. And it really comes down to identity-based security for applications. So super interesting stuff. A couple of solutions there. And then compliance overall, continuous compliance checking is required. How many of you guys are in a regulated environment where you're having to do compliance regular basis? There's a lot of solutions for compliance available in the marketplace, but really it's important for you to be able to comply with GDPR or NIST or HIPAA or PCI DSS. There's tools that will make this process easier for you in the development process, so you're not having to do it after the fact. I like to talk about Dome 9, which was recently purchased by Checkpoint, if you didn't know that. Just actually had lunch with Zohar this afternoon. Dome 9 is doing continuous compliance monitoring, but the thing that I like about this solution is that they actually show you in a graphic map all the different components of the application, all the different accounts, and what each account has access to. And it makes it really easy for you visually to see where you might have potential unwanted account access. So super useful. They're also doing compliant best practices using the well-architected framework within AWS. That's looking over at your overall AWS cloud environment as well, not just the code, but also the infrastructure code. So there's a benefit of using tools like this. I also like to highlight a couple of other products in the marketplace that do this. One of them is Redlock, which is now called Prisma Cloud from Palo Alto Networks. And then another solution that does this well is Cloud Conformity from our Aussie friends. So really cool tools available that are going to really automate the well-architected framework for you. So you're not having to manually check a lot of these things and checking configurations. Configurations change on a regular basis. And so by having automation looking at these configurations, super smart, saves you a lot of time and effort. Dome 9 is available, as I mentioned, in Marketplace, and they're actually charging based on the number of hosts per hour. So it's a fairly inexpensive, again, supporting innovation. But they also support what we refer to as private offers. So if you're ever looking at a vendor's product in the marketplace and you don't want to pay list, maybe you have a larger deal size and you want to just contact the vendor, or you want to contact your consulting partner, your channel partner that you buy through, contact them, contact your vendor directly if you'd like. And mention that you want to buy through Marketplace, but that you'd like to do a private offer. And so we give the vendors the ability to do a private offer, and the channel partners the ability to do a private offer for you on your behalf. And so that makes it really easy for you to get a good price, but it's also added to your AWS bill. So that's available. We didn't go through all of these different components, but you like the title? Is that pretty good? Matt came up with that, our DevSecOps lead. So there's a lot of different solutions in each of these, and I'll step aside for you to take photos if you want. I didn't really cover all of them, but I just want to highlight the breadth and depth of the catalog. And I want to mention here as well that in a minute, I'll show you my contact information. And if there's other solutions that you use or that you would like to use and buy through AWS that are not on this list, please let me know what they are. And that's what our team does, is we reach out to those companies. Many of them are already chasing us down, but there's occasionally one or two that we haven't talked to. Let us know who they are, and we would be glad to contact them and bring them into the marketplace. So let us know. Again, just a final closing. The benefit for you as a buyer of software, third-party software, of any of the solutions that we may have talked about, the benefit of buying these through the marketplace is that you can add any of these solutions straight to your AWS bill. If you have an enterprise discount program agreement with AWS and you have a commit to spend to AWS, you can actually buy from the marketplace, and that will count toward the spend that you need to spend with AWS. So we have a lot of different deployment options. You'll find marketplace software in a lot of different locations. So we have all these different consoles in AWS. A lot of our software is purchased directly in these consoles, the EKS consoles, the EC2, consoles, where a large percentage of our AMI software is actually purchased. It's right there in the EC2 console. At reInvent, we launched also the SageMaker Marketplace with over 218 algorithms from Marketplace available in SageMaker. And you'll see additional capabilities coming in the serverless space and other areas. So we're continuing to make software available. How many of you guys saw the announcement today of Security Hub? So Security Hub went GA actually last night. My buddy Eli Khan, the product manager, did an amazing job getting that out. And we worked together to put third-party software from a lot of the vendors that I talked about today into the Security Hub. And you're going to see a lot more vendors creating the Amazon finding format and putting those directly in the Security Hub console. And we're actually building APIs in Marketplace that are going to make it easy for you to search for just about anything that you want directly in the Security Hub console. And depending on whatever keyword you type in, it'll have a direct connection via API back to our catalog to find any solution that might match what you're looking for. And then you can actually transact straight through the Security Hub console. Makes that super easy for you. So here's some of the comments that we get from people that like to buy through the marketplace: the flexible consumption and contract models, single consolidated bill, easy deployment, in many cases instantly. We support CloudFormation directly from many of our listings, multiple AMIs, doesn't matter. Makes it really easy for you to launch via CloudFormation console or launch via SaaS. And that's it. We're all done. We're a little bit early, so you get some time to find your next session. Please take a few minutes to fill out your survey. We pay close attention to surveys because really all the content that we make available at these events, it comes directly from customer input. So first of all, rate the quality of the survey. Did it match the description? Is it what you were looking for? You've got my email address here as well. Please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Send me an email if there's something that you're looking for. If you have some input, maybe you've got some positive or negative input on a third-party vendor and you want us to know about it, open it up. Just let me know how we can help. And thank you very much for coming.